Welcome to Lights Camera Author. I'm your host, Jim Juno. Dynamic and debonair, Cesar Romero was best known for originating the role of the Joker in the 1960s Batman television series. As the first actor to bring Batman and Robin's arch-nemesis to life, Romero created the Joker's giddy, manic energy and that unforgettable laugh, traits that would become the foundation for future portrayals by Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, and Joaquin Phoenix. But behind the grease paint and flamboyance was a man of complexity. A closeted gay actor of Latin American descent, Romero navigated Hollywood's golden age with charm, talent, and resilience. Throughout a six-decade career, he starred opposite screen legends like Shirley Temple, Marlene Dietrich, Carmen Miranda, Frank Sinatra, Jane Wyman, and even a young Kurt Russell, while carefully guarding his private life from a prying public. Cesar Romero, The Joker is Wild, is the first full biography of this multifaceted entertainer. Author Samuel Garza Bernstein explores Romero's journey from childhood to stardom, revealing how Romero privately chafed at the Latin lover stereotype and worked to define himself beyond it. As an actor, a dancer, a singer, and a man. Batman made him immortal, but with 400 film and television credits, Cesar Romero left a legacy far greater than one iconic role. Samuel Garza Bernstein now joins us on Lights, Camera, Author. Samuel Garza Bernstein. I hope I said that right. It's not Bernstein, is it?
No, it's Bernstein.
Bernstein. Back on the show, you were on the show when you had the Joan Crawford book coming out,
Uh,
and you were kind enough to send some merchandise my way. I really appreciate it. And your new book is called Cesar Romero, The Joker is Wild. And I
yeah.
just want to make sure his name was Cesar, not Caesar, correct?
No, it was Caesar.
It was Caesar. Okay.
Yeah, he didn't spell it any differently. He didn't put the accent on it. He was very Americanized in that way.
Speaking of being Americanized, I mean that he if you were a fan of the 1960s Batman TV show, there was nothing more on, was it Tuesday and Wednesday nights or Wednesday and Thursday nights than Batman, and Cesar Romero was the Joker, probably the most well known of all the Batman villains. But and but he was much more than that. Let's start by, I mean, he was he got his career start back in the 30s, I believe.
Well, really in the 20s. I
20s.
mean, he started working as a dancer in the late 20s in New York and built a career on stage, touring and then on Broadway before he went into movies in 1934.
Amazing. And he was, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that he was anything other than the Joker on the TV show. And but your new book, again, Cesar Romero, The Joker is Wild. This is a deep dive into his life, isn't it?
Well, and into his work, because really his work was his life. He was extraordinarily ambitious, and he had a real work ethic. And he really, I mean, he worked until his 80s,
Mhm.
and he just kept going. I mean, he's got over 500 credits. It's amazing.
I remember reading that he was, I guess you would call him old reliable. If there was a TV show that needed a guest star, and the other guest star had canceled out for whatever reason, they could call on Cesar Romero. Isn't that true?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Caesar was. I mean, that particular quote is really about variety shows, especially. I mean, obviously, if you had a role that was right for him in an episodic or something like that, then sure, that's great. But he could always fill in on a talk show, on a variety show, on something where, the gig is to just show up and be yourself. And I think he really developed what I call the sort of the perfect heightened sense of himself, which isn't exactly who you really are, but who you are on television. That's sort of a reflection of you, but it's kind of it's just heightened and kind of just more animated.
Now, this book, is it the first time that somebody has dealt with his life and built
It
it?
is the very first biography of Cesar Romero, and I really, when I got the idea to write about him, I really was shocked to realize that no one had written about him. And to me, he just is such a huge part of the history of Hollywood, the history of the entertainment industry. And he really, I mean, he went from the 20s well into the 90s, and he just never stopped.
Yeah, and how did you get hooked on Cesar Romero?
Well, I tell you, the idea was really my agent's, Lee Sobel. He came to me and he said, I've been thinking about and wondering, has anybody done Cesar Romero? And I really, the minute that he suggested it, it just captured my imagination.
Being that he was so prolific, and he was also, I mean, like you said, this was the first time that anybody's ever written a biography about him.
Yeah.
Was it hard, first off, finding information?
Well, my starting point was at the USC Cinema Television Library, where he had many scrapbooks and lots of his memorabilia. The family donated them to the library after he died. And that especially gave me a very clear timeline of all of his theater credits because that stuff is not in a really a centralized database. I mean, it is for Broadway, but beyond that, you're really on your own. There's
Right.
not an online source that has all of that. So this was, article after article that was, and so many of them were, in the 20s, they just had this weird writing style where everything was so flowery and they talked about him physically almost like he was a flower or like an exotic animal or something. They were so into describing him as this sort of romantic Latin lover. And he was, there's just no doubt about it, that he was extraordinary looking. But then I went on and the library at Lincoln Center, the Billy Rose Library, which is part of the New York Public Library, had a lot of materials. There was no personal archive of letters, which I really wish existed, but it doesn't.
Was he a private individual? I mean, or he kept his private life private, of course.
Well, he was extremely private about certainly his romantic life, but also his private feelings. He wasn't somebody that would sort of say one thing in public and then say another thing in private. He was very positive, very upbeat about the people that he worked with, about the projects that he did. And he really kept that as kind of a way of thinking and a way of life. He just was not somebody who wanted to talk negatively about anything.
That's interesting. Now, given that he was private and that he didn't say bad things about anybody at all, it seems.
Yeah.
How do you separate, or how did you were you able to separate the I guess the myth from the man?
Well, some of it is that I really focus a lot on his work. I mean, this is really a discussion and a critical analysis of all the things that really led up to Batman, because it's my contention that the huge, kind of range of roles that he was able to play in all these different nationalities and in comedies and dramas and musicals and romance and Western and, science fiction, just everything. Um, I really think that those were the building blocks for what allowed him to kind of to attain what I think of as sort of pop cultural superstardom. I mean, he will remain part of the pantheon of American culture forever because of Batman.
Well,
And that's how did he get to a place where he was able to do that? So in that way, I look at all of his work, but I've also talked to a lot of people who worked with him and knew him. Also looked at other biographies, other things, other sources where people talked about him, and you know, looked at who was this person when the camera wasn't rolling, when he wasn't on stage, and he really, he was this kind of positive force in every situation. Nobody, in recorded history that I can tell, had a bad word to say about him. It was really the affection that people had for him was just really, really clear.
and amazingly, there was nothing to cover up. I mean, there didn't seem to be any part of his life, any event that demanded a fixer, so to speak, come in.
Well, he was arrested for drunk driving once. I don't want to.
Ooh.
I don't want to. I don't want to like completely. And he did fall asleep and light a fire with his cigarette, but in a different situation. So he wasn't, he wasn't always walking on the straight and narrow, but he really, he didn't hold a grudge. He just wasn't interested in dishing the dirt.
You know, were you able to find out definitively he was closeted? Uh,
Oh, there's no doubt that he was gay. That's not really that's not a secret. It wasn't really a secret in his lifetime among his friends, among most of the entertainment industry. People knew. But there wasn't any scandal attached to it. He wasn't running around in public restrooms getting arrested and stuff like that. Um, and I think it's very interesting that Scotty Bowers was this very colorful individual who wrote a book called Full Service
mhm.
that um, gets into the sexual peccadillos of many, many people in Hollywood in a way that's kind of by turns really funny and also kind of really lurid. There's some things that he talks about that you just go, I don't think if that's true or if it's not true, either way, I didn't need to read that. But it's very interesting to me that while just about everyone I've ever heard of is in the book, Cesar Romero is not mentioned once. And a lot of his contemporaries are, including what may or may not have been the great love of his life, Tyrone Power.
Mhm.
Certainly, Tyrone Power and Cesar Romero were devoted to one another, and certainly there was a love there. I certainly believe there was a physical relationship, but there's no paper trail there.
Right.
There are no there's no way to prove that. But I don't. I think we're a little bit past the point where we have to prove that someone, you know, had a certain orientation or not. It's not a scandal. It would have been in his day to come out publicly that way. But in 2025, it's no longer a scandal to say that Cesar Romero was somebody whose sexual orientation was gay. Um, I do think that he kind of had I mean, he never really made a lot of effort to hide anything. He didn't get married. He didn't have sort of fake girlfriends. What he did have was a thriving social life. He loved to go out and dance.
Yeah.
And so in terms of the public, there you would see him with all of these beautiful women having a fantastic time. There he is at the, Coconut Grove. There he is at Cirrus. There he is there. And he's obviously having fun. He's not like pretending, where sometimes you would see those same kinds of articles about somebody like Tab Hunter, and he just looks miserable.
Oh
He's
yeah.
in he's in a tuxedo at the Coconut Grove, like dancing with someone going, "Oh my God, I wish I could be somewhere else." And if you're sort of reading between the lines, I think you can kind of look at that and go, I'm not sure he's altogether like into that
Yeah.
girl he's dancing with. But but Caesar seemed to be really into what he was doing, and he was, tall and broad-shouldered and masculine in the way that men were supposed to be masculine in those days. And so I don't think the question came up very much, really.
And he loved to dance. I mean, he made no bones about it. He even said several times in interviews, "I love to dance."
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, he started as a dan I mean, his first professional career was as a ballroom dancer. I mean, that was back in the day when, don't forget, there wasn't television and there was barely radio. I mean,
yeah.
radio was just beginning in the 20s. And, they would have these afternoon sort of social gatherings. Sometimes they were tea dances, sometimes they were cotillions, sometimes they were just, afternoon programs of entertainment. And you'd have like a classical singer or an opera singer who would, do a few numbers. You'd have a dance team. You'd have somebody who did like little comedy skits. And Caesar was, with a dance partner, they would be hired to come in and do a few dances. And and then he would go down the street to another thing and have another job. And then you would, it was a very kind of itinerant existence. And he was sort of like, I have tuxedo, will travel.
And you mentioned like that one book, and I mean, when I was doing some research into it, I found a book also, Hollywood Gaze, which supposedly had
Close
an interview.
Hadley's yeah.
I mean, this book came out after he died,
Yeah.
so
I
you know,
don't
I have to
look,
take it with a
there are
salt.
people who take great umbrage at Bose Hadley's work. I do not know him. I have no, he's written a lot about gay people in Hollywood and stuff. Um, there's nothing in the interview that makes me think it's impossible that it happened. It all seems fairly reasonable, that I
The
could
interview
imagine
itself,
happening.
the
Yeah,
interview itself.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not, it goes into a couple of areas that are a little bit, shall we say, bawdy.
Body.
But
As we've been saying lately with the president.
yeah, I mean, it does allege a very funny kind of drunken night with Desi Arnaz um, that is actually entirely possible. I mean, it's not, it's not alleging that Desi Arnaz was like this gay guy. I mean, Desi Arnaz was not gay, but if he sort of leaned back and had a moment where he
That would
was,
be news to Lucy, I imagine, you know?
I could, I could, like I say, I don't know if that interview really happened with Bose Hadley.
Yeah,
I don't, but I don't know that it didn't, and I have no reason to believe either way.
right.
All I will say is that it does not contradict anything that I discovered, in any particular way. And all it is evidence of is that, he had a sex life. That's not scandalous.
No,
And,
it just
you
struck me
know,
as it struck me as unlike him to be talking like that.
well, I,
Not saying that it didn't happen. I'm not saying that, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, it, I do know what you mean. That there was a certain aspect of it that seemed a little bit, but I mean, it was also, he was with kind of a younger, cute guy that he might have been interested in. It's not, it wasn't a formal interview. It was
Right.
something that was, sort of off the record to an extent that only came out after his death. And, and as I say, I have no interest in throwing shade on another writer, on his work, when I have no knowledge of whether it was true or not.
But
Um,
what have you found in your book that people may not realize? Because or
well,
what surprised
certainly.
you? Yeah.
Well, I knew nothing about his illustrious family. I mean, his grandfather was the Cuban liberator, Jose Marti, who, was a hero for helping to liberate Cuba from Spain. And, that was a whole other thing that I was just fascinated by. I was also fascinated that he grew up wealthy and that there was this interesting intersection of cultures where his family was very accepted, even though they were Latino, they were very accepted into New York society. And, I'm always interested in things that contradict our notions of how things worked.
Yeah.
Because we have these very rigid ideas about, well, that wouldn't have been possible. Everybody had to be a WASP and everybody, and not necessarily. And I do think that that privilege that he experienced as a child really came in handy when he got to Hollywood because I think he had a stronger sense of himself than a lot of people. He and Joan Crawford were great friends.
Hmm.
Well, Joan Crawford arrived at about 19, ready to be made into something. It's like she didn't exist. She was a blank, page
Right.
going like, let's create who I am. Well, that wasn't Caesar at all. Like he had a very strong sense of himself, and he had a career on Broadway, and he arrived in Hollywood with a clear idea that he belonged, that he wasn't afraid to take up space. Um, I also found that I was surprised at the diversity of the work that he did. I mean, I sort of had a vague idea that, well, he did those musicals with Carmen Miranda. I sort of remembered him from The Thin Man, which was his first big movie. Um, but I didn't know about the Cisco Kid movies because that just wasn't a genre that I knew much about. And I
Zorro
didn't
TV show. Yeah.
yeah, the Zorro TV show, those kinds of things. Um, I was surprised at just how he would just pop up everywhere. and once you start like pulling that thread and you just go, "Oh my God, he's everywhere," and um I don't know, that really captured my imagination in terms of his ability to kind of remake himself over and over again as the business kept changing. Because it did. I mean, the business changed remarkably just under his feet while he was going along, and he just always found a way to kind of, figure out how he could flourish.
And we got to touch again on Batman because as
Oh
a
yeah.
kid, I was watching Batman religiously. Giving away my age here, but I was a kid when it was on, and I never realized that the Joker had a mustache. Maybe I was naive, but
Well, it's funny because when it's easy to see now because everything is in high def, but you would have been watching it on a TV probably with an antenna, with fuzzy and maybe even in black and white for some people. And even though the show was in color, and you just didn't see things that clearly back then. But it's often portrayed that I don't know that it was almost like capriciousness, like Caesar was like, well, I'm not shaving for anybody.
vanity, yes. Uh-huh.
But actually, he was the spokesman for a line of men's suits called Petrocelli at the time. And there were billboards and ads of him looking all dapper in brand new suits
Oh,
with his mustache. And that was a huge ad campaign that was going on right as Batman was going into production. And he was only working for a few months or not even that on Batman. Then he had a promotional tour to do. And he was like, I have a responsibility to show up as the guy they hired. And
exactly. Yeah.
and to match all of that print advertising that was in, every major magazine in the country. So it wasn't quite as just like, him like going, I'm not shaving my mustache. He really had a good reason. And God knows though it is a very funny thing to look at now. And well, I think it kind of contributes to the notion of the Joker just being so demented, just, off his rocker.
It works. Yes, I know it. I mean, and he's still my favorite Joker. Uh,
Oh yeah. Oh
I,
yeah. Oh, I'm right there with you.
but I tell you what, the book is Cesar Romero. The Joker is Wild. The author is Samuel Garza Bernstein. Samuel, I really appreciate you coming back on Lights Camera Author. Do you have another book in the works?
I do, but I do want to just mention in there real quick that if I'll be in Boston, I'll be in New York, I'll be in Provincetown, San Francisco, and Los Angeles starting at the end of August on different book stops. So,
All right.
keep a lookout. And I just finished the manuscript for a book on Roddy McDowell
Oh,
that
okay.
Kensington will be publishing that next year in June 2026.
Another Batman villain. The
Well, I mean, just in one episode,
Yes,
but
I know. I know. The
I don't think
bookworm. I know.
that's not, Roddy McDowell's big claim to fame. But
I know, but that's how in depth of Batman I was. I know that actor from The Bookworm.
The two of them were on set together to meet Prince Philip when he was touring Los Angeles, and they were shooting The Bookworm at the time, but they asked Cesar Romero to come and sort of tag along, and they I just think it's hysterical to think that Prince Philip was a Batman fan and
Yeah.
wanted to meet Roddy McDowell and Cesar Romero.
Fantastic. Well, I tell you what, Cesar Romero, The Joker is Wild. The author is Samuel Garza Bernstein. You can pick up the book. You can pre-order it now on Amazon, and it comes out August 26th. So go to your bookstore, have it ordered. Go online, order it yourself. Samuel, again, I want to thank you for being on Light Camera Author today.
Thank you.